For more analysis, we're joined by Tahani Mustafa, a senior Palestine analyst at the International Crisis Group, ICG. Tahani, thank you very much indeed for your company. What's your reaction then to those noises, positive, optimistic and cautious as well, coming out of the White House following that meeting between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump?
Well, I think this definitely warrants a lot of cautious optimism, and it seems very unlikely that we're going to see any significant pressure on Israel to actually, one, act in good faith, and two, look towards a permanent settlement to this conflict past the 60 days, if we even get to that point. We still have the same old sticking points with regards to this deal. The lack of breakthrough is not surprising, considering that, again, there's no pressure on Israel to really be acting in good faith in these negotiations, and the more substantial parts, ensuring that there are concrete guarantees, is just simply not there.
Yes, and some of those comments from Benjamin Netanyahu further reinforced the fears of many Palestinians that Israel has absolutely no intention of leaving the Gaza Strip in its entirety. In fact, quite the opposite. It intends to remain there and have at least some control over the security situation.
Well, that's really no surprise there. And I think those two issues need to be completely separated here. If we're talking about a settlement to what's happening now, with regards to any kind of pause or ceasefire, that's something. But the expectation that Israel is simply going to relinquish control, whether it wants to term it security control or whatever else, that's something else entirely. And that is something that we're speaking about with regards to a serious settlement to the broader conflict here. And that, I don't think Palestinians are under any illusion is going to happen anytime soon. The idea that Israel would simply relinquish any kind of control over Gaza, which it has retained despite the narrative of the last 15 years, with this idea that Gaza was somehow a independent state, was simply not true. Israel always retained security control. And now, after the 7th of October, Israel's sense of security has been completely shaken. So this assumption that we would suddenly see it willing to allow for any kind of entity to establish itself in Gaza that could potentially re-threaten that sense of security again is very unlikely. Palestinians are not under any illusion that that will happen, as I said, anytime soon. What's more, we're also seeing Israel's ongoing incredibly violent expansionism in the West Bank. Nobody expects any kind of ceasefire or pause, especially within the 60 days, to really halt Israel's actions there. So I think we really do need to be very careful about not conflating the two issues here. And Netanyahu has made it very clear, not just in this meeting, but throughout the last almost 22 months now, that this concept of a Palestinian state will never be acceptable to Israel. The best Palestinians can hope for is the arrangement they had pre-7th of October, where Israel controls everything: security, land, air, sea space, economy, everything. The best they can hope for is some kind of devolution that they have now, if that.
Yes, and perhaps the worst of the fears has been voiced now by Israel's Defence Minister, Israel Katz, laying out plans for in what he would call a humanitarian city, where Palestinians would be forced into before perhaps being forcibly displaced out of Gaza. Now, they're talking about this publicly. Has this gathered more and more pace ever since Donald Trump voiced his idea that other countries could take Palestinians in once they were moved out of Gaza? He said those comments earlier this year.
Well, Trump's statements have been quite contradictory on this issue. So those are, I think the rhetoric we're seeing coming out of Trump is a bit difficult to sort of gauge in terms of the implications on the ground. But I think in terms of what we're seeing on the ground, that is very much the reality Israel has created. And it's very much the reality that many of us were warning about at the outset of this war, where Gazans would be pushed into smaller and smaller patches of territory, dependent on aid for everything, while Israel retains full control of the Strip. And worse yet, they could potentially try to make life so unbearable that they will try and drive the population out. Israel's made no secret of that. And this idea that regional states that Trump is now claiming are open to the idea, again, that comes as no surprise. With the right price, it's very unlikely that regional states will reject any sort of deal that is offered if it's in their favors. I think that's been very clear since the outset, where regional states have been quite pivotal in providing a lot of the diplomatic, economic, and security cover for this war on Gaza. So this idea that we could potentially see displacement again is really nothing substantially new. And I think many Palestinians have really resigned themselves to that fate, that Israel will try and displace them, not just in Gaza, but we're starting to see that reality unfold now in the West Bank, where internal displacement has become the first step to what Israel is openly calling for, which is full annexation and full displacement of the population there too.
Yeah, and until anything concrete happens, Palestinians across the occupied territories are left in limbo. Tahani, thank you very much indeed for your analysis. We appreciate you joining us on the NewsHour.